Viewers and listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. We have Professor David Luke, and we have a new publication from the London School of Economics Press. This book is entitled How Africa Eats, Trade, Food Security and Climate Risks. A copy of this book can be accessed on the link that I'm going to paste right in the description panel on the upload for this video. I do have to emphasize this again and again. You know what, Mr. David, okay, all the Davids, the Professor Davids and the Mr. Davids, you say it's the names of kings. I have to remind you that, you know, one of the things we want our people to do is to click the link that is in the description panel so that they get to access a copy of this book. So we want to move to our next segment of the show. We really want to understand what the contribution the book makes to the discourse of food security, the discourse of food insecurity. These are topical issues on the African continent. We talk of hunger, we talk of famine. You know, mostly, you know, people think of Africa. I wanted to say that there's this thing that I always see on the internet and most publications, that when we're talking about hunger, famine and poverty, the pictures that we normally see are pictures of Africans and are pictures of kids in Zimbabwe, in Somalia, in the different other countries. So I think, you know, it's something that is very topical for us, especially the African continent. So I wanted to tell me, you know, the kind of literature that you interacted with, the kind of literature that the book is contributing to.
As I said, we used a lot of data from the FAO. One of the public goods, if I could put it that way, that the UN does offer is data. They collect data on, you know, some of the most unimaginable things. Sources included data from the FAO, but also the literature across the board on food security in Africa. We have a well-indexed part of the book that annotates and references these the sources that we looked at. But, you know, so in terms of the research, I think it has been as comprehensive as we could have been. Also, the team I worked with, we had 2 workshops to interrogate the ideas that were coming out of the research, and we invited others to be part of that process as well, to give us their insights. And the range of people who were involved are people who work on a daily basis as professionals on the issues covered by the book. So we are confident that what we came up with, you know, we of course are not claiming that this is the last word on all of these topics, because, as you know, the issues evolve, knowledge evolves, and so on. Yes. But we're confident that what we have put out is a very profound overview of the issues concerning food security today, and certainly any policymaker, any activist, stakeholder campaigning on hunger in Africa, I think would be well armed with the kind of knowledge that they need to make a difference on these issues.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. David Chukwas, you are the one who interacts a lot with you know, the literature on some of these issues.
Just to say how intrigued I am with the idea that Professor David Luke did look at the intersection of food security and trade. I think that's really, really amazing. And I did find it really interesting how Africa does trade most of its products in its raw state. Well, is at the end of the day, they are importing finished products and how that contributes to food insecurity. So I thought that was really an interesting insight. Maybe if Professor David Luke wants to just comment on that, because I really found that really interesting, and I found that to be having far-reaching impact in terms of food security in the context of Africa.
Sure. No, that's the basic model. You describe it very well. That the production and trading aspect is not sustainable, and surprisingly has not changed over the last 70 years or so. The fundamentals are there. Of course, you have some industrial development that has taken place. You have various other initiatives on services, but the basic fundamental model is in place in terms of the scale at which it happens. So basically, yes, that model is correct. I'll just make two comments. In other conversations and discussions I've had about the book, someone mentioned to me that this model also explains indebtedness, the indebtedness that African countries perennially find themselves in. Just again, giving terms of trade and that, when you're dependent on commodities, although I did mention that that was not our objective to explain indebtedness, but, I was told that was another insight. Another comment that was made is that it explains migration to Europe. In the sense that, facetiously, this person said, well, the people, economic migrants are following the commodities, which they are not adding value at home, but if value is being added elsewhere, then they are following the commodities, which I thought is another insight. But in any case, you could see the power of the model, in terms of how it situates African economies, the fundamental characteristics. And as I said, something that has not changed, unlike the change that we have seen in other parts of the world, including in Asia, that also the starting point was commodity dependence, but have been successful in terms of diversifying their economies. But beyond that, we also have, we do explain that the imports are not just manufacturers. It's also, ironically, food imports. So we're exporting commodities, of course, which includes minerals, but also some agricultural products, and importing food. 42 African countries are net food importing countries. So the model also explains this, showing the deficit in regard to food trade, but also not only in regard to food trade, because we looked at agricultural capital, which we defined as agricultural machinery that you need for farming, also fertilizers, pesticides, etc. There's also a deficit in these areas as well. So overall, you have, if you like, two types of deficits: the major deficit relating to the overall trade. Then within the agricultural sector itself, a deficit again because of the structure of the trade. Then the third model that we have in the book, also in chapter 2, is a model of climate change and how global warming is producing these extreme weather events that we are seeing, droughts, floods, stronger storms, and so on, and that as well as changes in ecosystems that give us locust swarms and invasions and that kind of thing. That this is, and again, we show with data how specific agricultural products are being impacted by these by global warming and these extreme weather events and so on. So we have that model also to try to explain this aspect as well. Then I think I should also mention that we looked at 8 specific commodities that.
Yes, I was about to mention that one.
Yeah. 8 specific commodities that we argued are essential to food security in Africa. Of course, these 8 is not all what Africans eat, and but they're, in terms of calorie intake, they're up there, so to say. And of course, the 8 there are regional variations as to how much of a contribution they make to calorie intake. So we looked at yam, cassava, maize, rice, wheat. We looked at livestock, meat, poultry, and fish. Of course, yam and cassava are more common in West and parts of East Africa, whilst maize is more Eastern Southern Africa. Rice is now becoming common throughout the continent, including North Africa. Wheat also very prominent in North Africa. Livestock, of course, is common throughout the continent. Poultry and fish as well. We looked at production in all of these and able to show that Africa trails global generally due to underinvestment, and we could talk about this because it's a key issue under agricultural policies. But then also, these products, except for yam and cassava, are heavily subsidized in other parts of the world. So basically, what it means is that for 6 of the 8, I said yam and cassava, the exceptions, for 6 of the 8 African countries are not really competitive in these products because of the extent of the subsidies, the effect of the subsidies to price suppression in which manifests itself in African countries. So the conclusion we drew from this is that production is not competitive because of this effect of price suppression, which basically means that you can import more cheaply these products than you can produce them. So, that's a dynamic that we have to face on the continent. The other point on this is that the subsidies, although they have this negative effect on African production, precisely what makes food available globally. So that's why we have food on the planet for all 8 or 9 billion of us, because in some parts of the world, food production is heavily subsidized, which makes food available. But on the African continent, it has this effect of price suppression. It makes food more cheaper to import than to produce. And it also means that we become food dependent.
Yes.
It fits into that basic economic model as well. You go back to the economic model, the low incomes, and the inability to buy food and so on. So it's all sort of connected, but you have to understand the dynamics of these 8 products. Then one more thing to say about these 8 products is that the World Trade Organization, as the regulator of global trade, its rules allows for subsidies, and that is because food is understandably, I think, seen as a commodity that is different from any other. Is the demand for food, as economists will say, is inelastic, and it's a very sensitive product in all countries. Availability of food. So that is allowed, and actually African countries too, if they have the fiscal space, there's nothing stopping them from subsidizing agricultural production. In fact, the WTO rules allow for something called the development box, which means that you can you can notify that you are spending on irrigation, on support to farmers, on all sorts of things under the development box. But what we're finding is that African governments don't have the fiscal space, are not really notifying or showing any signs of supporting agriculture the way it is supported in other parts of the world, other than the sort of narrow focus on the commodities that are exported to bring foreign exchange. The focus on food is not comparable to what you find in other parts of the world. A couple of other things to be said. When you look at a product like fish, that is one of the ones that we thought really is exploitative the situation that Africa finds itself in. We have two oceans and one sea on the borders of the continent, the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, but we don't have on the continent the ability to exploit the fish resources within the 200-mile limit. And so what we find is that there's others who are exploiting this resource, and in some cases even selling it back to African countries. And again, although there is now a new agreement at the WTO on fishery subsidies, but just to note that many of the countries that send out these fleets are also subsidizing them in various ways, through the shipbuilding, to the fuel they use. So you're coping also with subsidies in regard to fisheries, which this WTO agreement is now supposed to try to rein in and to discipline. So even for a resource like fish, which is an important source of protein that African countries should benefit from, that is not happening, again, because we don't seem to have the means and we have not developed them.